Dan, it's a joy to connect across the miles and across the ocean with you today. So, welcome to our Learn to Listen series.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to finally make it happen.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I would love for you to share just some of your story, your dance background, just even personal testimony background, and give people an opportunity to learn a bit more about who you are.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, so my name is Dan Cossette, and I'm originally from Connecticut, Northeast United States, for those who might not know. And it's just a little tiny state between Boston and New York. We're not famous for much. And I grew up in a Christian environment. My parents got saved when they were in university, and then eventually myself and my siblings came along to join their family, and so they took us to church as kids and read us Bible stories, and that was really great. And at some point, I also developed sort of a interest in creative things. I wasn't originally a stage performer as I am now, but my parents pushed me into a youth choir, and I went sort of kicking and screaming the whole way. But it was a brilliant program for young people, and so I got involved with the choir, and then eventually I got braver and tried out to be part of a trio, and then got braver and tried out for a speaking part, and eventually apparently I was hooked. So that was sort of how I got into the arts, and that was through a Christian youth program as well, so that included sort of Bible studies as well as choir rehearsals and acting and whatever. And then got involved with another church as was coming to my teenage years, and they had a really active youth missions program. And that youth group was where I discovered physical theater. They brought a mime artist in to teach us mime sketches so that we could go to countries where they didn't speak English and still share stories about Jesus through movement. And I absolutely loved it. I spazzed out. I was a young teenager, and I pulled a muscle that day just jumping around in my church, learning how to do mime. And that really then became my first creative arts, kind of performing arts passion. Started to get videos and resources, and learning how to do that at home, and then looking for further education. And to jump ahead a little bit, went and pursued that at sort of post high school, university level in California with a Christian art school, and that was fantastic. But also at the time realized that if I was going to start traveling the world and sharing about Jesus, I probably ought to be living my faith a bit more. And I was not a bad kid. I was a good kid on the outside. But to be completely honest, I was in my teenage years struggling with pornography and thought processes that were not helpful. I couldn't get my hands on anything, and I thank God for that. Actually, now in retrospect, that actually preserved me. But my mind was a pit, and nobody knew, and I thought I was getting away with it. But I felt the conviction of the Lord, and knew that I was not telling the truth if I was going to be preaching about life and salvation through Jesus Christ, and not actually serving the Lord with my heart. And so began to put that on the altar to God, and began a process. Actually, it was a process, again, in all honesty, to lay that addictive thought process at the foot of the cross, and to not pick it up, and then to pick it up, and then to put it down, and then to battle through what was an addiction, and finally find freedom by the grace of Jesus Christ. And it took years, but it was a fight that I appreciate, that the Lord led me through. So yeah, got involved into the performing arts, and after 3 years of Christian performing arts school, Bible courses. It was like a double major with theology classes at night and physical classes and rehearsals all day, and then performing on the weekend. It was the most intense program that I think you can be in, and it was fantastic. Left the school and went back to Connecticut. The school had been in Pasadena, California. Went back to Connecticut, started freelancing, and trying to start sort of an arts ministry. And at the time, I thought I was going to start an arts ministry, and it was going to be amazing and powerful and impactful. And after a few years of trying to get that going, my mom said, "Why don't you get a job?" With all the love and support that good parents can give, and that turned out to be also the word of the Lord for my life. And I went into retail, stocking shelves for a number of years, and went through a process of breaking, actually, where I felt like the Lord was deconstructing what I thought being a Christian was, and being useful in His kingdom. And I remember the day when I stopped introducing myself. I realized I had introduced myself to a new employee as just Dan from the stock team, and I didn't need to justify it, and I didn't need to say, "Oh yeah, well, I'm just a part-timer and I'm going to be doing something else, and I'm a performer," and all these other things that I used to kind of think my value was tied up in. And that was a point where I realized that God had done something in my life to set me free from those expectations. And then years kept rolling on, and slowly got to a point where I had to lay down that part-time job. It had become a full-time job, and then it was part-time again, and then I had to get rid of it because I was doing more arts work and looking to network with believer artists. I started looking for dancers because there's not enough of us mimes in the world, and so got involved with some fantastic dance organizations that are headed up by believers. So Cheryl Cutlip and the Project Dance Foundation, that led me to Randall Flynn and the Ad Deum Dance Company in Texas. And to shorten some of the story more, I ended up dancing in Texas for a number of years, and then got reconnected to one of my mime friends from school, whose name was Melanie, and she lives in England, and so we started dating and did about 6 months of Skype dating after we reconnected at a dance festival in London, and then we decided to get married. So I moved over to Cambridge in the UK, and now am a freelancer, and I direct a physical theater company with Melanie here, and we do projects throughout the year and bring in other artists as much as we can. And I also moonlight with a few smaller companies down in London, but also Sprung's Dance Company, which is a long-standing Christian contemporary dance company that's been in the UK for I think since the early 70s or so. And so that's fantastic to be part of that legacy, as well as some other companies in London. So yeah, that's a whirlwind tour, but some of the highlights.
It's fabulous. Yeah, Springs, I've known about them for a long time. Good friend Candace, one of the original, founders, got to visit her a couple of years ago when I was over in the UK, and just we strolled down memory lane of looking back from the 80s to what Springs was doing. And yeah, so that company is definitely solid and continuing. And I know when we're talking now, we're still in the ramifications of COVID and how that's affected things, which is, there's a goodness to that, and there's a lot of difficulties and challenges to that as well. And we were actually visiting you and I a bit about that before. But apparently you've listened to God. You've really heard God and delved into your own faith journey. I'd love for you to share about the ways you have developed that discipline of really hearing the voice of God.
For some, a small topic like that. Nice. Yeah, thanks. I you caught me. You caught me on a bad day. Um, there's I just got news that a Christian leader I know has just obliterated his marriage because of an addiction to pornography that's been going on for a number of years. And I've been reflecting on how that could happen and how you can be in leadership and 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 have that for decades in the background, and thinking that um, maybe was somehow separate or safely compartmentalized. And I think that we can forget that the voice of God, the still small voice of God, is still a small voice. And it's not because it can't be loud. It says in the Psalms that the voice of God can shatter the trees and toss the mountains like salad, and there's nothing the voice of God cannot do, but he speaks to us in a small voice. And we get that phrase from First Kings, I think it's 19, where the prophet Elijah in Israel at the time is fleeing from the wicked king of Samaria, who's hunting down the prophets of the Lord to kill them. And he hides in a mountain, no doubt wondering where God is in the midst of the carnage. And then there's a hurricane, and it nearly breaks the mountain, and following that, but there's no word from God. And then there's this earthquake, and if I'd taken shelter in a cave and the earth suddenly started to shake, I would regret all my choices. It must have been horrifying. And then there was fire on the mountain, and who knows if that was just a forest fire or a meteor or what, but there was absolute chaos, and God's voice wasn't in any of it. And after the whole mountain had been shaken, Elijah hears this little voice, this small voice that says, "Why are you here?" And so he covers his face and he comes out of the cave to speak with the Lord, and God gives him his I believe his final directives for his ministry and what he's to go on to do. And he has an encounter with the Lord, but it's in a small voice. And I think God does that on purpose, because we have to then listen. We have to listen for the voice of God. And it's usually the small one. And it's so easy to drown it out. And you can tell yourself excuses until you can't hear that voice anymore. You can make up a ton of stuff until you can't hear that voice anymore. But you just have to stop and you have to listen again. And it will be there. And that makes it sound, I suppose, like I've got everything all together and I know how to do it. But even across this last year of lockdown, and in the UK, it's been at times quite severe. Not always as severe as other countries in Europe and around the world, but we've had it pretty tight, and it's been easy to be introspective and inverted and not really thinking about anyone else. I still struggle at times to know how to express my Christianity without being able to encounter other people on a daily basis or a regular basis. I don't know how to love one another without there being other people around. I don't know how to share the gospel or the light of Christ without running into somebody who I could talk to about anything like that. And so some of those expressions have felt quite limited. And so it's been easy to just be caught up in your own thing, or get sucked into the next video in the playlist, or the next online game, or something that could easily just pull you away. And I've played plenty of video games and things online in the past pandemic, just waiting for, you know, something else to come by, and to the point where I've felt a pause in my own spirit and saying, even if there wasn't anyone here, would you put down this game long enough to pray again? Even if you think you're tired of praying, or even if you think you've prayed for the pandemic as much as you can, or the people affected by it. And so I think my personal journey is coming around to needing to silence some of those other voices and find where God is right now, because those, it might seem silly. It's just, oh well, it's nothing. There's nothing harmless, or there's nothing harmful about maybe what I just mentioned, except that they take away, they distract. So yeah, we need to listen for the small voice, and that conscience, that leading, that knowing in your heart what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And I think that has been more often my life journey of hearing from the Lord as well. I've heard stories of people who've had visions and or felt the call of God and seen their name come down out of heaven in golden letters, and they knew they were called. And that's cool. Like, that's amazing. If that's your story, then God bless you. That never happened to me. But I do know that God calls me, and I have sought his leading, and through perhaps a number of messengers feel confirmation, whether it's wise leaders or parental advice, and a combination of things I'm seeing in the Bible as I read God's word, and then knowing firmly that that's actually, yes, this is the step to take, or this is the message from the Lord for me right now. He's saying, I just know this is what we need to do. And to the point that I've had people come up to me and say something else, and say, oh, this is the word of the Lord for you, ba-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, it's not. I do know that, because that's coming from nowhere. So I don't know where you got it, but it's time to reassess that in the light of, I don't know, a bigger picture. So yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know you're a people person in that context of having that engagement with people and how important that is, but being able to draw those boundaries and clearly hear from God, clearly hear from his word. Sometimes we lean so much on what somebody else's interpretation is. And a part of maturation is really getting to that place of listening for ourselves and making it a discipline to do that. And we can have our focus time that we're going to read the scriptures, or I'm just going to quiet myself and really focus on you right now, Lord. And he'll speak. And sometimes it might feel a little silent, but when we're about other activities, he can also speak. And so he's just not limited. So I appreciate hearing, the process for you, and that it does involve people at times, and it does involve the quietness of the Spirit directly to you, and it does involve the word, and it does involve your creative process, and it's a lot.
Yeah, I almost feel it's a saturation thing. If you're seeking God's voice, it doesn't always come in that instance. Like, I would now open the Bible, biff,
right
there it is. But because I've been in the Word, then I'll know God's voice when I hear Him somewhere else. Or through a person, or through a piece of art, or through nature, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So with the leadership opportunities that you've been given, and that just that you carry, what have you cultivated just as far as leadership qualities that you value, or ones that you may still be working on, or what you esteem to, or what admonish other people? Okay, here's some things that you really think are quite valuable as a leader to grasp.
Yeah, I think humility is what I see is so important. And I think one way that manifests in our work is that I need to recognize the value of the people I'm working with, and try to live out the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have others do unto you. And to realize what that means as a freelance artist, and especially if you're working with other freelance artists, how do I want to be engaged as a professional artist, and how do I want to be respected, and what am I looking for, and can I give that? Can I actively give that? So it's not just I don't do what I don't want people to do to me, but it's the proactive version that Jesus gave us, which is I will do what I want people to do to me. And yeah, so trying to be that that light, and so recognizing the value of people's time and energies and effort, and where they're at in life, and what they might need as far as patience or coaching, or and trying to approach everyone as equals, even from a position of leadership, because you do have to make calls, and you do have somebody has to lead something, or else things probably won't get done. So, and if there's a vision that people are gathering around that we're going to try and make something happen, then yes, of course there's a leader, but everyone's contribution is valid. And so yeah, that's part of the story, I think. And yeah, I've seen some really beautiful leadership examples in that, and hopefully living them out in the work that we do.
Yeah, just as I'm listening to you, it's becomes like a lifestyle. And what I'm hearing you articulate in that humility, it's also just respecter of person, and calling that out of other people, or just allowing those leadership skills that other people have to make room for it, for others to make room for that. And I think that's really beautiful. And if we don't get to practice whatever it is that we are being called to do, as a leader, or as a demonstrator, or someone that might have others who are following behind, then we're just robbing either ourselves that opportunity, and fear will come in to prevent us from doing that, or allowing others, or pride, or there's all sorts of ways that things will inhibit or enhance that call within us or in others. So you're invested in the arts, obviously, as you've articulated. You mentioned a little bit about health and wellness in regards to Pilates in that context, or that's really beautiful. How have you seen, and obviously we're in this pandemic time, so maybe prior to pandemic, maybe even where we are now and projected of where we're potentially headed, how have you seen God move in the arts? And what ways are you sensing either your part in that, or just a common idea, thought, thread of things that discoveries that you're making, and know that other Christian artists are making?
You like small questions, don't you, Cynthia? So yeah, pandemic. Let me count the ways. So we've had quite a journey. I got involved with online teaching fairly early on in the process, which I thought I was late to the party, actually. I don't think I started teaching online until April or May of last year. And and I already knew of people who were doing it. And then I was surprised still to be finding people by September, November, friends or colleagues from near or afar who still hadn't done it. I was like, really? I thought this was how all of us are making our living now. Definitely do Pilates. Found that is really restorative to my body, and helps with the correct alignment and clearing out of toxins really that I can accrue from my other workout and dance work. So I find that has been a key part of just keeping myself fit as a artist, and taking care of the instrument that I have to work with. And also discovered that it needed a bit of cross training with that. And so the reason I smiled when you mentioned it was because I've found a kind of high intensity workout that I've gotten involved with, and with the disappearance of gyms, had to kind of create my own online class. We call it power workout, and it's all these horrible burpees and squats and jumps, and but found that sort of intensity was missing from the dancer's diet, and that we often work so hard at our lightness and our gracefulness that we don't always train for power and explosive precision. And now that is probably reflecting more the contemporary dance world than, say, the breaking dance world. So if you're a break dancer, you're like, what are you talking about? I understand. But I found that has enhanced me and made me stronger and more durable as an artist. And that is something we all want. We don't want to break when we get into the dance studio and didn't warm up with just the right sequence. But having a little bit of intensity training has actually helped me. So that's been fun. So I've kept that going through power workouts, and yeah, that's been nice. Artistically, we've had some little projects on the go. We've done some choreography projects online, and that is a challenge, working with delays on video feeds and people's sounds. But my desire was to make a work that was hopeful, and started this project at the beginning of lockdown, which was also around the time of the upheaval that came after George Floyd's death, and the sudden awareness that many of us who've not been exposed to racism realized the breadth of the inequality. And so I wanted to make some art, but something that was hopeful. Heard a really encouraging, inspiring word by Steve Rooks, who's a brilliant dancer, formerly of the Martha Graham Company, but a believer. And he said, nobody wants to see 19 ballets on COVID-19 at the end of all this. And that inspired me to try to lift people's eyes a little bit. And so I'd been working on a dance to the old Bill Withers song Lean on Me, but a remix that had been done by a group that stood for racial diversity, and just doing some hopeful movement. And so that was great. We were gathering artists on a Friday to work for a couple of hours for a number of months, and impart that, and even got a chance during the brief moment when England opened up in September, October, to get some people together and rehearse in the same room, and to share that experience, and to talk and to pray in regards to that. So that was really great. We'd put on hold a lot of our projects that we had on the go, and one of those is our largest project, which we are currently undertaking, and that is a counter-trafficking project. We're working with issues of human trafficking, looking particularly at sex slavery, and wanting to address that, and looking at the role of the user, the buyer. I've seen a lot of fantastic artistic pieces, dance works, and a couple of theater works, people addressing human trafficking. Most of the choreographers and theater makers that are addressing this topic are female, which they are doing fantastic work. It's fabulous. so gut-wrenching and so powerful. But I feel there's not enough men raising their voice on this topic, and it's not a women's interest topic. I was looking at some statistics today, and 80% of prostitutes are female, I think was what this percentage put forward, and but it's something like 95% of users or buyers are men. And so it is not just a women's issue, though. It's a humanity issue. And knowing what, I think because of my past and knowing what the slavery of the mind, sexual bondage can be, I feel it's very important that as men we raise our voices and say, this contributes to an entire society decay that has hundreds of thousands of people in the modern civilized, quote unquote, civilized world imprisoned in an exploitation cycle. And we need to stand up now and say, actually, no, it's not okay. So that's our big project, and we were scheduled to go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is the biggest fringe festival, I think, in this side of the world, and that got cancelled. So we've postponed some of our touring activities, but we are endeavoring to make a film. We're gonna get the dancers together as soon as we can get into a building, hopefully this summer, and film the stage production and then package that for availability, which I'm hopeful will make it actually easier to tour in that sense, to get it to digital platforms and out to interest groups, community groups, church groups, and looking at the topic and saying, we need to address this because people's lives are on the line. Not just the ones we typically know of as the victims, but also people's lives are on the lines who are the users, who don't realize that they are also on the line. Their lives are on the line. Yeah.
That is just an example of how powerful the arts can be used in such powerful ways in society. And I appreciate when people write about it, or I appreciate when you hear testimonies and stories. But when you really can dive in and use an artful expression that really helps us to see, hear, experience vicariously, just you feel it. You just are so moved in such a profound way. So thank you for doing that work, because I know the topic needs to continue to, light needs to be shown on it. It just has to. And like you said, here we are in 2021, and this is still the reality that we have so many entrapped and imprisoned and enslaved. And yet we know that God is calling out and wants to end that injustice. And so using the creativity, using the voice of God, using what he's given you and your collaborative team, I just bless you in those endeavors, and know that as it's coming together, we'll, as an audience, will be looking forward to both seeing that and experiencing it, and being able to help to be an advocate to get it out to other avenues, because the message has got to be heard, and transformation has got to happen. But in closing, I just would love to hear if there's any other things that you would like to share, just nuggets of, things that you found, discoveries that you've made along your journey, or encouragement, admonishment for others who may be hearing. Because I know you've gotten, I don't want to feed you, what it is I want you to say, but I know just perseverance is something that you've been going through, like so many, maybe what have you learned there, or just continuing to cultivate as a craftsman, how do you use your creativity, and how does God speak to you, or just I know there's a lot more in you.
I think I was thinking a little bit about that, the question, where does your artistic inspiration kind of come from? And it occurred to me that there are going to be our work, or perhaps yeah, our artistry is almost like a garden in some senses. There's going to be some pieces that you just you just pop out. They're quick. They're like the grass. They're just short. They just come up and you've got it, and you've got some little things. You do it once and maybe you never revisit it, and that's okay. That's actually part of the creative process. It's part of being a creative being. And you've made a dance work, or you've made a short poem, or you did a quick sketch, or whatever it is, and those have a great function, but they're short-lived. And then you'll have other projects where you put a little more into it, and you get perhaps a shrub or a rose bush, if you will, and those will take some feeding, and you might even come back to them occasionally. You have to water them a bit more, and we have a couple of small projects. I do have, I went through this process of not knowing what I wanted to say as an artist, and so taking some of my favorite stories and putting them on stage. And then I felt I'd kind of hit that creative ceiling. I was like, I can't find any more other people's stories that I want to tell. So what do I want to say? And not having a good answer for a long time, just kind of poking at a few things. But then started to get ideas, and this trafficking show was one of them. And something I felt passionately about, that I knew I needed to do something about, despite how difficult it was, despite how difficult the topic was. And then there's some other shows that conversations I'm having, noticing that people didn't like to sweat. I was just running into a bunch of people, young people, don't like to sweat. Embarrassed when we'd teach dance workshops in schools, and they would change their clothing between sessions. I was like, we've got 3 more sessions and you're changing your shirt again? Like, honey, we're here to sweat all day. So, and then hearing from my wife, who also works, when she's not doing the performing arts, she's an architect and works in the construction industry, and says there's a lack of skilled laborers. We can't find people who can lay bricks with any kind of quality. You can make good money as a bricklayer, actually, but there's just nobody who can do it. And so came up with a project that was about brickies, bricklayers, and just said, there's satisfaction to building with your hands, and there's nothing wrong with hard labor, manual labor, using your muscles and exerting yourself. And at the end of the day, you've built a building. We often, the value I think we sometimes are instilling to our young people is, oh yeah, go to college and get a good job so you can stare at a screen all day and make good money. Like, that's our value. That's our value, making good money, and actually there's a huge value in physical labor, and we're getting away from that, but we shouldn't. I don't think we should. So that was a bush. We did a 2-movement dance work about that, and we kind of crafted that. We may come back to it. We may try to sculpt that into a larger fixture in our artistic garden, but it's a bush. And then we've got this tree that is our counter-trafficking show, and that's been growing now for, the seeds were planted over 10 years ago. We've been researching it since 6 years. We finally got it on stage probably 4 years ago, and it's still growing. And so as an artist, I think you don't have to worry if you found your, what do they call it, opus magnum or whatever. You'll know after about 10 years if you've found your opus magnum, maybe after 20, maybe after 30. But in the meantime, just create something, because you're creative and God's put creativity in you. And maybe it's the grass, and maybe it's the rose bush, and maybe it's the tree.
Yeah, it's good. Well, and I believe not looking down at what we may feel or what others may feel is the small thing. right? But, oh, grass, it's the small thing. Well, we need grass.
Yeah.
Animals need grass to sustain,
Quite nice.
and how amazing it is. Just that's one of my kids have known through the years. Like I love watching moving grass when the breeze, and you just see. And if we're driving somewhere, and I'm like, Mom, look! It's like, oh, you know me, moving grass.
Good for
But
the
just
soul.
valuing. Say it again.
It's good for the soul.
Yeah, it is. It is what that does. And, I believe that as we are a part of that, that symbolism of the grass growing or the bush, that those are foundational to lead us to those next things that can be even bigger, even grander, even larger, because we've proven faithful in the creative endeavors, the creative practice, going to the artist of all artists to get our ideas, just being consistent and showing up. And I appreciate that about you. And I appreciated getting to know you many years ago, meeting you and seeing how God has continued to lead you along this path. I remember you more when coming in, and dance was more the newer thing, and mine was the more familiar. And just watching your, perseverance and tenacity and determination and all of that, and those are just valuable attributes. So thanks for modeling that. And now, picking up your life and moving to the UK, and it's being welcoming of the things that God's inviting you into. We all can continue to learn from that, and know that God is moving in our lives, and are we going to meet him with the yes that you've been meeting him with. So I bless you and Mel in your continued endeavors, and look forward to when this all opens. I'm hankering to get back over to the UK sometime, so we'll connect in.
Nice. Good. We'll look forward to it.
Yeah, that'll be great. But thank you so much, Dan, for taking this time today. Just really appreciate you and hearing your story. And I'll be sure to connect in any kind of social media or ways where people can find you, because I know there'll be some definitely interested to learning more. So thank you, my brother.
Thank you.